Okay, good evening Kiel, and good evening world. So, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Emee Estacio, who's going to give this invited lecture this evening. Dr. Estacio is a best-selling author, speaker, and founder of the PAME Code. She is a chartered psychologist who helps people embrace their true worth so that they can live happy and fulfilling lives. Her latest best-selling book is called Fear Is Not My Enemy, and she's going to talk to us tonight about her next book, which is all about the imposter syndrome. So I'd like you to join with me in welcoming Dr. Estacio here this evening, and look forward to hearing more about this fascinating topic.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Nikki, for that kind introduction. And good evening, everybody. I'm Emee. It's so great to see so many familiar faces here tonight. I really do appreciate that you came to this public lecture. I have my friends here from psychology, some of my friends from primary care, from nursing and midwifery. It's just so great that you've come over, and I hope that I would be able to make this worth your time. I'll do my very best. So I would assume that you came here because you want to learn about imposter syndrome and what we can do to remedy it. And let's start off by defining what it is. So imposter syndrome can be defined as this persistent feeling of self-doubt, incompetence, and inadequacy, despite evidence that reflects otherwise. Now, when we talk about imposter syndrome, we're not talking about actual fraudsters here, okay? We're not talking about these fraudsters. People who experience imposter syndrome are, in fact, the real deal. It's just that they experience so much self-doubt. They feel so unsure of themselves that they feel as if they're just fooling everyone into believing that they know what they are doing, when in fact they actually do know what they are doing, if that makes any sense. So they have this so much self-doubt when people come to them for advice, because some of them are experts in their field. They feel as if it's like, I'm not sure, if I can handle this. I don't think I'm good enough to give advice to people. Or when they are given tasks or responsibilities, they would shy away and say, I'm not sure if I can take on this responsibility. I mean, who am I to pull this off? Or some of the braver ones, slightly braver ones, they would say something like, okay, I'm going to put on a brave face. I'm going to try to pull this off. But it's only a matter of time that people will realize that I'm actually just faking it. I'm just winging it, right? So how many of you here can relate to that? How many of you here can, oh goodness, yeah. See, there's so many people who've experienced imposter syndrome at one point or another. In fact, research suggests that about 70% of us will experience imposter syndrome at some point in our working lives. So it's actually quite common. It spans across different genders, different race, and it spans across different sectors, including business and finance, health and social care, education, the literature and the arts, information and technology. So it spans across different sectors. Now, I have to say, and I'm really sorry to say this, but fresh graduates and postgraduate students, especially, where are the PhD students in this room? Yeah, I'm so sorry to say, but PhD students are hit really hard by imposter syndrome. You are in this unique position where on the one hand, you are still training, it's part of your training, you're a PhD student. But on the other hand, you're also on track to becoming this world expert in your field, and you're doing your research, you're doing your training, you're doing all this reading. But the more you read, the more you realize that you don't know anything, right? You read and read, it's like, oh my goodness, there's so much that I don't know. And you sort of doubt whether you're going to be good enough, to pursue this career. So it's very common for postgrad students, for PhD students to feel this way. And some early career professionals might be in the same position as well. You've completed your qualification, you start your job, but because you're new in your job, you feel as if you're still trying to find your feet. You feel as if you're just winging it day by day, and you're scared that people are gonna find out that you're just faking it. So it's not a very comfortable position to be in. So you have these people on the one hand who experience imposter syndrome in this way. On the other hand, you have these world-renowned experts. You have these people who have done years and years of, they have experience, like, professors, doctors, world-renowned artists who have accomplished so much in their respective fields. And yet, because of their self-doubt, they still feel as if they're still just fooling everyone. They receive recognition and they feel as if they don't deserve the recognition. And sometimes they feel ashamed or even guilty of their success because this time they feel like, okay, I think I've successfully fooled everyone. This time, and sooner or later, they're gonna find out that I'm a fraud. So it's quite a scary feeling, for people to experience this. And it's one common characteristic of imposter syndrome. People who experience imposter syndrome tend to deny their competence, and they have this inability to internalize success. Even if you've accomplished so much, no matter how much you've achieved, you still feel as if you don't deserve any recognition or any success. And for people who experience imposter syndrome, they also tend to attribute their success to external factors. So they may say something like, it's not that I'm good, it's just that I got lucky. The stars aligned, I was in the right place at the right time, everything just worked out for me. So, it's not me, I just got lucky. So people with imposter syndrome will say things like that. Or when they perform certain tasks with ease, because they've been trained or they've been doing this for years, they do tasks easily, but they may falsely assume that these tasks are easy to begin with. So they would say something like, I did it really well, but it's nothing special. It's not that I'm special. It's just the task was easy to begin with. So they neglect the fact that they were trained or they had specialist skills or they had specialist knowledge. It's not about them. It's just that the task was easy to begin with. So that's one characteristic of imposter syndrome. The other characteristic is that nothing is ever good enough for them. So they set these very high expectations for themselves and this incredibly low assessment of their performance and outcome. So there's this huge gap between what they expect and what they assess the outcome would be. So research has shown that people who experience imposter syndrome also tend to exhibit perfectionist tendencies. But when we talk about perfectionism, we have to differentiate between adaptive perfectionism and maladaptive perfectionism. So adaptive perfectionists are those people whom we could just assume are fantastic in what they do. So they've mastered their craft for many years, and they strive for perfection. They refine their skills, they hone their skills, and when they achieve perfection, they actually feel pleasure. They recognize their success, and they feel pleasure when they achieve perfection. And that's a great thing, right? To strive for perfection. Maladaptive perfectionists, on the other hand, are those people whom, despite their best efforts, it's never good enough for them. So when that happens, they actually feel like a failure. So even if they've tried their very best, nothing is ever good enough for them, and they feel like a failure, and it's just because they tend to be overly critical. They can't recognize their own success. And as a result of that, they are unable to find satisfaction in their jobs because nothing is ever good enough. Now, the problem with imposter syndrome, especially for those who experience maladaptive perfectionism, is that they tend to attribute their self-worth on performance and achievement. All right? The trouble with that is if you are setting these unreasonably high expectations and you're pushing yourself to achieve those standards, and you can't seem to reach it no matter how hard you try, and you're basing your self-worth on that, how do you think that's going to affect their well-being? You can't seem to achieve what you're aiming for. Their self-worth will get crushed that way. So it is no surprise that imposter syndrome, especially if it is prolonged and if it is left without care or attention or support, can manifest into anxiety or depression. In worst cases, it could also manifest into suicidal behavior and ideation. When you have exhausted all your efforts, all your time, all your energy, and you've given everything you've got, and still it's not good enough, imagine how that feels. And when the environment takes away opportunities for you to shine, for you to flourish, or for you to really show what you're truly capable of, then all of this would seem like a dead end, wouldn't it? It's literally a dead end. Now, I'm going to share with you a story. It's a story of someone who's very close to me. And she actually came this close to ending it all. She was having some issues at work, and people didn't realize that she spiraled into depression. And so she told me one day she went out for a walk, and she wandered around for many hours. She just kept walking, and she didn't actually tell anyone where she was going until her husband realized that she was missing. So he went looking for her, couldn't find her, so he called her on her mobile. And it turns out that phone call actually saved her life. That phone ringing actually stopped her from doing what she had to do. When she walked out, she wandered around. Turns out that she took herself to the place where she was going to end it all. And that phone ringing stopped her at the last minute. It's still quite difficult for me to share this story because it's someone who's very close to me. But fortunately for some of us have taken themselves out of this cycle of depression and anxiety. But there are still people who are trapped, in this cycle of loss of control, loss of autonomy. I'm not saying that this is all down to imposter syndrome. I'm not saying that. But we've heard of so many cases of people taking their own lives, some even high-profile cases where you think they've already have it all. But if we don't pay attention, if we don't reach out to people who are still trapped in this cycle, then we actually risk losing, so much potential and so much talent. And so, what are we going to do? So there's actually a remedy. This is what the lecture is all about, right? I said it's imposter syndrome remedy. So let's go with the remedy. Tonight I'm going to share with you 3 remedies. And I say remedy because imposter syndrome is not something that we can cure. It's something that you can just remedy because self-doubt will always be there. Whenever we have a new project or when we have a new job, it's new. You might feel a little bit of self-doubt, but that's absolutely fine because, it keeps you on your toes, right? But you need to be able to learn how to cope with it. You need to be able to manage it effectively. And these are some of the things that I'm going to share with you tonight. And the remedies I will share with you are based on psychology theory and research because my background is in psychology. And we'll cover that. And most of these research and in theory, I've actually applied it in my own practice as a coach. Okay? So let's get on with the remedies. So the first remedy that I'm going to share with you tonight is about knowing your inner critic. Now, I would assume that the psychologists in the audience would already know. I assume you already know about the inner critic. Now, for the sake of those who still don't know what an inner critic is, if this is a new concept for you, the inner critic is actually this tiny voice inside your head that tells you all these nasty things. What does it say? Yeah, it says here, you'll never be good enough. You're a failure. You'll never be good at this. It can scream sometimes, you're just unexpectedly. And so it's really important for you to recognize these inner critic voices so you'll be able to understand what you need to do when it comes. But most self-help gurus will actually tell you to silence your inner critic. Some of them will actually ask you to banish your inner critic, to destroy it, to get rid of your inner critic. But I'm not going to ask you to do that. I'm not going to ask you to destroy your inner critic, because whether you like it or not, your inner critic is still part of who you are. It might be inside your head, but it's still in your head. It's your head, right? So if you try to banish it, if you try to crush it, you're going to end up having a fight with yourself. So what I'm going to ask you, instead of having a fight with your inner critic, what I'm going to ask you to do is to actually listen to your inner critic. What is your inner critic telling you? What is it saying? Why is it saying that? And where are these messages coming from? You have to listen, you have to explore, you have to understand, because that way you will have a better assessment of what you need to do next, right? So instead of fighting with your inner critic, you need to have a dialogue with your inner critic. So this is what we're going to do tonight. The first thing that you need to do is you actually need to identify what your inner critic is telling you. So we're going to have an audience participation now. Earlier this evening, you were actually given Post-it notes by our friendly student ambassadors. And what I'm going to ask you is to actually identify these inner critic messages that's been bugging you these past couple of weeks, if you like. So if it's telling you, you have a new project, you're going to fail, just give up. Or if it's telling you, you're not good at this, everybody will find out that you're useless. Just write it down and put it in your Post-it note. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. All right, so we have these inner critic messages in the audience. Are you all done? Do you need some more? Yeah, was it surprising to be writing these inner critic messages? So what I would like you to do now is, okay, some people might object, but what I would like you to do now is to actually hold your inner critic messages and put it in front, post it in front of you so the person next to you can actually see it. Don't be shy. Just put it in front so the person next to you can see it. Is that all right? Massey, are you shy?
After her death.
Okay. So just put it there. Don't be shy. We're all sharing. And I can see some hesitation. Sometimes we have all these insecurities and we don't want to let other people to see it. Are you embarrassed to share it with others? But it is there, isn't it? Yeah. So this is what I can observe here. So there are people who are quite comfortable sharing their inner critic messages, and there are some who are a bit reluctant. It's my inner critic. No one's supposed to hear about it. It's my insecurities. I can't share it with anyone. But this is what we are doing tonight. So you have it there. You have the Post-it notes of people next to you. Have you noticed anything similar, any similarities from your inner critics? Do you share similar self-doubt, similar insecurities, similar pain points? Because this is something that we all have. We're all human. Even if some people here say that they've already silenced their inner critics, Yeah, maybe they've mastered it because, they've been doing counseling psychology for years, so they know the techniques already. But there are some of us who are still training and still getting comfortable with our inner critics. But as you can see, everyone has this insecurity, these doubts. And that's what actually makes us all human. Even for people, who you think has all figured it all out. Those people who you think, or, is just beaming with confidence. Huh, Richard? That's someone who's just, figured, he's doing everything right. But you still actually hold these insecurities. You still have these doubts. And the purpose for this particular exercise, I wanted you to write it and actually put it in front and for other people to see, is that when you have these inner critic messages and you get it out of your head, you can actually get to share it with someone else. The trouble with inner critic messages is that if you're just holding it onto yourself, it can be quite a burden. But when you get it out there, it gets it out of your head and it comes out into the real world, right? And you can actually get to share it with someone else, so someone else could explore it with you. Someone else could actually reframe these messages with you. So it's not just going to be a dialogue between you and your inner critic. It could be a discussion between you, your friend, and your inner critic, just to add a different perspective. So as you can see here, inner critic messages everywhere, but we can actually get to share it with someone else. And I think that's why coaching works, or counseling works, or simply talking things through with a friend can actually work, because you can share your burdens, you can share your insecurities, your self-doubt with someone else, and you can explore all these inner critic messages with that other person. And it makes it a little bit lighter. That's why I have the PAMI code. PAMI is actually a Greek word that means let's go together. My husband, Andreas, he says that all the time. PAMI, 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 he says that all the time. But, it just means let's go together. You don't have to go through this journey on your own. You can share it with someone else. So, as far as my books are concerned, it's the PAMI code to, this time is in the PAMI code to imposter syndrome. My other book is the PAMI code to overcoming fear. This is all about sharing and going together in this journey. And in these books, I actually also ask my readers and my clients to always listen to their inner critic. I don't ask them to crush it or banish it. I ask them to listen to their inner critic. And as you can see there, I ask them to give it a bit of TLC. Now, you might find that surprising, but TLC here doesn't really mean tender loving care. TLC is a questioning sequence that I've invented, if you like, but it's actually based on a questioning sequence that will encourage you to explore your inner critic messages in a more structured way. And the TLC technique goes like this. You look at your inner critic message and you ask these 3 questions. You ask, is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? Now, for the counseling psychologists in the room, you might be familiar with this kind of strategy. It has its, and I drew inspiration from rational emotive therapy. That's why you have all this logic, embedded in it. But it's a questioning sequence that I've used with my clients to help them explore their inner critic messages. So the first question here, you ask, is it true? Because some of the inner critic messages that we have are just blatant lies. Whether these are lies that you tell to yourself or lies that other people have told you about yourself and you just, it just kept repeating over and over and you've sort of internalized it. But some of these messages are actually lies. And you need to be able to differentiate which ones are true and which ones are not. So, for example, if you just started a new job and your inner critic is telling you, you're not qualified to do this, just ask the question, is it true? Really? You're not qualified to do this? I mean, you went through that whole recruitment process and they just actually recruited someone who's not qualified? So you have to ask, is it true? And when you answer that question, you have to base it on actual evidence. Because if you just base it on your feeling, you might just say it is true. You have to find evidence. So in this case, if you're telling yourself, I'm not qualified to do this, ask, is it true? And look for evidence. This time, you might have to look at your CV. And you might find some qualifications or relevant experience in there that makes you the appropriate person for the job, right? So always ask, is it true? I'll give you another example. If your inner critic is telling you, give it up, you're not good at this, just give it up. Again, ask, is it true? And if you're going to answer this, make sure that you look for evidence. So let's say, for example, if you are a lecturer, if you're saying that you're not good at this, what's your evidence? Have you got feedback from your students? Have you been getting complaints from your students how rubbish you are? Or are they all just failing? Or, they're just not learning anything from you? So ask that, look for evidence. If you are a nurse or if you are a doctor, are your patients all just getting sick all the time? Are they not getting better? Or what do your colleagues say about the quality of your care and your interactions with your patients? So look for the evidence. And if you are a parent, because this could also apply in your day-to-day life. If you are a parent and you're saying, I'm not really good at this parenting thing, ask, is it true? Have a look at your children. See what kind of person they're turning out because you are their parent. So, if you have your inner critics, ask the first question, is it true? Look for evidence, and it's more likely than not that you wouldn't find sufficient evidence to support that it is. Okay? So that's the first question in the TLC sequence. The second question is it logical? Because the trouble is, some of the inner critic messages might be true, right? That's why it's really important for you to listen, because if it is true, you wouldn't want to be in denial, right? So I'll give you an example. Last month, my inner critic was telling me, look, Meng, you're not ready to deliver this public lecture. You're just not ready. And you know what? It's actually true. Last month, I wasn't ready to deliver this public lecture. It took me, a month to actually refine it and deliver it to this standard now. But I also have to ask, is it logical? Just because I wasn't ready at that time, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't deliver it at all. So I had to go back to logic. And so if I got stuck with the illogical thought that just because I'm not ready now, then I shouldn't do it at all. If I got stuck in that thought, then we wouldn't have this public lecture tonight, right? So, if you have that inner critic message, always go back to logic as well. And this is actually a common, a common problem for people who experience imposter syndrome. Sometimes they would say, I'm not ready for this, or I'm not good enough for this, so I'm not going to do it at all. This is actually a problem because people with imposter syndrome become averse to risk, because they are scared that they might fail. Or they focus on avoiding mistakes rather than embracing opportunities to learn and grow. Because the last thing that they want to do is make some mistakes, and then people will find out how incompetent they are. So they are at risk of stagnating their careers because they stay in the shadows, and when they are given opportunities for new responsibilities, they turn it away. They would say, I cannot take that responsibility, I'm not good enough, and they stagnate their careers. So just be careful with that. You might be thinking all the time, I might make these mistakes. People might judge me. I might fail. People will find out. You think and think and think. And your career will end up like that. That's why I put it like that. It could actually kill a career. So always try to go back to logic. If you think that you aren't ready now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll not be ready forever. Okay. Now, I'm going to digress a little bit because I want to liven things up again, share with you another story. I actually left my job as a lecturer a couple of months ago. And I did that because I wanted to pursue my ambitions as an author and as a coach. And when I did that, I actually took these online courses. I took some courses on copywriting. I took some courses on blogging, some courses on online marketing. So all these real world stuff. Because even if I had this academic track record of publications, writing and presenting to live audiences and writing for lay audiences is a completely different ballgame, right? So I had to go through some courses and do some more training in that respect. And one of the courses that I took is by this internet sensation, John Moreau. He's like the king of bloggers online. I absolutely love this guy. He's absolutely amazing. His blogs his blogs are read by millions of readers around the world. His content, it's just absolutely filled with value. And this is a guy who has built a seven-figure mega blogging empire. He built that from scratch. And this is someone who couldn't move anything but his face. He's such an inspiration. He's absolutely amazing. If you read his blogs, and actually even if you just read the headline, you just have to click it. He's really catchy and he will really attract your attention. So I wanted to learn from him because he's the master of bloggers online. And I thought, maybe he's just a genius, or maybe he's just really talented, or he's just really gifted when it comes to blogging. And you know what? When I actually took his course, it turns out that, yeah, he was actually really good at what he does. I told you he's the master of blogging. But it turns out that he became really good at what he does because it took lots and lots and lots and lots of practice. He was sharing in his course that in his early, at the start of his career, he was writing 50 headlines a day, every day, so he can master the art of writing headlines that stick. Headlines that grab your attention. When you're busy doing your work and then suddenly this headline comes up. Even if you're busy, you just have to click on it. You have to read it. Posts that go viral. He's that kind of guy. And he didn't master it overnight. It took lots of practice. In fact, what he would say, it took deliberate practice. The kind of practice where you actively seek feedback, where you actively look for mistakes, so you can actually refine these mistakes and improve the next time. So that's actually something that I learned from John. I learned a lot about how to write for lay audiences, but it made me realize that, yeah, he's really good at what he does, he's skilled, but it actually took a lot of time and a lot of practice for him to get where he is now. And this is actually a message that I want to give to the PhD students and postgrad students in this lecture tonight. If you are thinking that this is too hard, or if you're thinking that you'll never be good at this, go back to logic. If you are saying this is too hard, it's not always going to be that hard. If you keep moving, if you keep practicing, things are going to get easier eventually. And if you are saying that I'll never be good at this, if you're saying that now, with more practice, with more experience, then things will get better eventually. So it's all a matter of time. It's all a matter of practice. Just go back to logic. Just because you think that you're not good at it now doesn't mean that you'll never be good at it at all. Okay? So I hope you found that useful. It doesn't mean that you're a fraud. It just means that you're at a stage in your career that you're just starting and learning and growing every day. Okay? So that's the second question in the TLC technique. The third question is it constructive? So some inner critic messages may be true, some inner critic messages may be logical, but you also have to ask, is it constructive? Is it helping you? Is it helping others around you? How does it benefit you or your career? So ask, is it constructive? Again, I'm going to share with you another story because I love stories. I have this client from New York. I was coaching her in November. She's a school teacher, and she's really passionate about teaching. She always tells me how she works really hard and she always wants the best for her pupils, right? So sometimes she would say she would burn herself out just to give, to deliver the best learning experience for her pupils. But she would also say something like, even if I work very hard, it still seems as if my colleagues are doing so much better things than me. They will do something more creative with the kids. They will do something more innovative. And it feels as if I'm lagging behind. And everyone is just doing better than me, no matter how hard I try. So let me focus on that particular phrase because I'm just guessing that you've probably said this thing to yourself at some point in your career that everyone is doing better than me, right? It's not a really nice thing to say, but this is something that we say. And I actually do feel guilty because I've said this thing myself, Even if I'm doing the best that I can, and even if I know that I'm doing quite okay, when I start comparing myself to others and I can see that everyone's doing better than me, then myself, my self-worth gets deflated. So I was working with my client on this inner critic message, and we gave it the TLC treatment. So we asked, is it true? Is it true that everyone is doing better than you? And she answered, yeah, I think so. I think they are doing better than me. And I said, okay, you think? Where are you basing that from? Where's the evidence? Do you have like your performance record here and you have their performance record here? You put them side by side and you can compare that everyone's doing better than you? And she said, no, it doesn't work that way. She said, it's just a feeling. I observe them. They do their stuff and they do it effortlessly. Whereas here I'm pushing myself so hard and they're still doing better. I said, okay. So we have no actual data to compare you with them side by side. So let's just work on data that we already have. Do you have like an annual review with your head teacher? Or do you get feedback from your pupils about your performance or about the quality of your teaching? And she would say, yeah, we actually do that. We have an annual progress review of some sort, so we have that. And I said, okay, so you have your annual review. What does your head teacher say about your performance? And she would say something like, actually, the head teacher is my mentor. So she would always rate me as excellent because she's being really nice to me. She would say I'm good at what they do. So you can actually see the imposter syndrome manifesting again. It's not that she's excellent, it's just that her head teacher is really nice to her, because she's the mentor. So I said, look, do you trust your head teacher? Do you trust her judgment? And she said, of course, she's my mentor. And I said, you have to accept that evidence. You have to accept that you are, in fact, excellent at what you do. You're actually really good at teaching. And it turns out that she was also popular with the kids. The kids love her, and the parents were also raving about her teaching. So it's actually untrue that she's holding that thought that she's not doing well. She was actually doing brilliantly well. And we move on again to this inner critic message that everyone is doing better than me. Because we don't have that evidence to compare it side by side, we just can't do anything with it. I would ask her, is it constructive? How is it helping you by comparing by comparing your performance to your colleague's performance? How is that helping you? And that's when she came to realize that this message that everyone is doing better than me, it's not serving her. It's actually just pulling her down. And in fact, we did talk about this eventually. And I said, so what? So what if they're actually doing better than you? You're doing well. It's not a competition. How can you make this inner critic message constructive? And I said, is there any way that you can learn from them? What innovative practice are they doing? And is that something that you can adopt in your own? So instead of something that will pull you down, everyone is doing better than me. Of course, someone else might be doing something better than you, but you can learn from them. It's not a competition. You can learn together and grow together in the process. So you make it more constructive that way. Okay? So that's it. That's actually the TLC technique. So you ask, is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? And in that way, you can actually examine and explore your inner critic messages. You don't have to banish it or crush it. You have to listen to it. You have to explore it and find ways where you can make it more helpful and beneficial to you and your career. Okay? So that's the first remedy. I'm sorry that I took that whole time just ranting on and on about the TLC technique. I will promise that the next two remedies will be quite quicker, okay? So the second remedy is actually called the flashlight technique. Now, the flashlight technique is actually one of my favorite techniques because it's really quite simple, but the impact is really strong once you get how it works. This is something that I teach my clients, particularly my author clients. These are people who want to write a book because they have so much knowledge and they want to share it with other people. But sometimes imposter syndrome kicks in and they feel as if they're not good enough to write a book. And I teach them the flashlight technique and almost instantly the self-doubt, just melts away. I was also teaching this technique to a bunch of mamas. They're called the Free Mama Movement. We were having a group coaching session like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the Free Mama Movement is actually a bunch of working moms. They're mostly in the United States. They are working moms who run their own freelance business from home. So they are virtual assistants, social marketing managers, copywriters. So there's a lot of imposter syndrome going on in that group because they are returning from work after birth, but they're also running their own business and they feel like they are fooling everyone, like, we're frauds. Well, actually, no, you're not. And I teach them the flashlight technique, and again, just like that, self-doubt melts away. So I'm going to teach it to you now. I'm rambling again. So the flashlight technique. So how does this work? You have to imagine that you are holding a flashlight, right? Because it's a flashlight technique after all, isn't it? So you're holding a flashlight, and the light could only flash at one point at a time, right? And so if you flash it onto yourself, and if you're feeling doubtful about yourself, if you're feeling incompetent, and or you're feeling insecure about yourself, then that's the only thing you'll see, right? You're putting all the attention onto your self-doubt. And when you do that, you'll magnify these feelings, right? And so what you need to do, instead of flashing the light onto your self-doubt, instead of flashing the light onto yourself, what you need to do is you need to flash the light out, right? You need to shine the light out. If you are a teacher, you need to shine the light out to your students. What do they need? What do they need to learn? What are their aspirations? What are their ambitions? Shine the light out to the people you are aiming to serve. If you are a nurse or if you are a doctor, instead of focusing on your self-doubt, shine the light out onto your patients. What's causing their pain? How can you relieve their pain? How can you make them feel better? Shine the light out onto your patients. And again, if you are a parent and you're feeling doubtful about your capacity and your abilities as a parent, shine the light out to your children. What can you do to be a good role model for your kids? Right? So shine the light out to the people around you and to the people you're aiming to serve. That way, instead of drawing the attention onto yourself, you actually let it out. Recognize that there are people around you and that there are people you are aiming to serve. So that's it. That's the flashlight technique. So instead of focusing the thing on yourself, you actually shine the light out. Just remember that. Just shine the light out. Okay? I hope you found value in that. Yeah. Excellent. So we get to the final remedy. And I think I probably should have started with this final remedy because I think this is actually the most important one. And this is all about the environment. Because the environment matters. Tonight, we were talking about inner critics. We were talking about all these thoughts inside our heads. We were talking about how we feel. Everything is personal, everything is inside our heads. But what about the environment? We have inner critics, but what about outer critics? What if it is the environment that tells you that you're not good enough? Or what if it is your boss that tells you, that's nothing. Anyone can do that. It's nothing special. What if it is your boss that brushes away your accomplishments? Or what if it is the environment that stagnates your growth? Or crushes your self-worth and makes you feel as if you don't belong, or as if you don't deserve any recognition or success? Or what if it is your environment that stops you from dreaming or believing that what you do or who you are is actually worth something valuable? Sometimes it's quite easy to draw the conclusion and say things like, ignore her, she's problematic, she has issues. Or you could say something like, it's her problem, she feels that way. Or she should just get over it, it's her problem, not ours. And it's just easy to do that, right? Just blame the other. But if the environment fails to support what sparks joy in people, if it actually stops people from opening up and flourishing with confidence, and if it rewards mediocrity by putting people in undeserved positions of power simply because you share the same genitals or skin color, then the problem is no longer personal, is it? It's structural. And when we have this environment, when we try to tackle the environment and recognize that the environment matters, then we can tackle imposter syndrome, but on a much wider scale. We need to foster an environment that promotes respect, an environment that encourages everyone and recognizes everyone's contributions regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, disability, immigration status, or socioeconomic background. An environment that recognizes your worth and encourages you to be the best that you can be. An environment that promotes cooperation rather than competition, where colleagues uplift each other and bring out the best in one another. The environment matters. And when we recognize this, when we actually promote an environment, when the environment inspires you and motivates you to learn and grow, then that's when we can really remedy imposter syndrome. There will be no more room for self-doubt because it is the environment that will remind you of what you are truly capable of. It is the environment that will push you to keep going, to keep striving for perfection, to become adaptive perfectionists. And it is the environment that will help you and support you to succeed. And so, if you are in a position of power or influence in your organization, I would strongly encourage you to foster this environment where people are valued and treated with dignity and respect. That way, we can truly embrace our worth, maximize our potential, and flourish with confidence at work and in life. Thank you.